From the Citizens Bank studio, I want to welcome you to the Ricky Matthews Show, where we celebrate the people who are working so hard in the trenches all across this great state to make Mississippi such a better place to live, work, and play. You know, it's the holidays, and one of the things about the holidays that is so important is the opportunity we have to reach out into the community and to give back. You know, people do it in so many different ways, but the show I had yesterday was especially special. I had John Ray and Marcio Borgazon and my friend Jamie Bates, who have worked together for a number of years in so many different iterations of their community work. But one of their mainstays over the years has been their Camping for Hope effort that was actually scheduled to be this Saturday. We had the three of them on yesterday in the expanded show for the Ricky Matthews Show that went into the Mississippi Delta, of course, the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and in the Jackson markets. And we talked about the effort, but it looks like the rain is inevitable. And as a result of that, they have decided to reschedule the Camping for Hope effort for Saturday, December the 9th. I want to encourage you to look it up. This might be a great opportunity if you're thinking about a way to give back. The way that Jamie discusses it, they're building community around the homeless community, and Coast Transit Authority is helping provide free transportation for homeless people who can go there and get free meals and get sort of a care package that includes a blanket, a coat, a tent. And in fact, if you have any of those things, they would be very thankful if you were to provide them to that organization. But look up Camping for Hope. And again, it's not going to be this Saturday. Instead, it's going to be Saturday, December the 9th. And, my kudos to my friends who have worked so hard to put this effort on. It's really, really important. Okay, now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times Picayune. I look forward to chatting with him every single Friday. But as the Saints season sort of lingers on after two extraordinarily frustrating games, you keep hoping it's. We've got major red zone problems with this team, sort of a Derek Carr, I don't know, maybe curse. And the Saints defense have not been playing very well. So it's tough time to cover the Saints, isn't it, Jeff?
It's funny, Ricky. We were talking yesterday out of camp. I think fans would rather them just not move the ball at all than to kind of tease and torment by driving up and down the field and then not being able to score a touchdown when they get down near the goal. They'd almost rather them just 3 and out than to go through that. So, yeah, it's a difficult time to be a Saints fan right now. I get it. Team's been disappointing. But, as disappointing as everything's been, we keep using the carrot at the end of the stick. I mean, they're still tied for first place, and it's kind of amazing they're still in this thing. But I think fans have become frustrated. As I wrote this week, it's not just that they're losing, it's how they're losing. And I think there's a knowledge, acknowledgement that, big picture, what's the vision, what's the long-term plan here? I think people can see beyond this very unique situation with the team being in first place and really not being very good. People are seeing beyond that and starting to question the direction of the organization.
Yeah, the level of frustration, I've talked about this before over the past several weeks, actually, but the level of frustration is probably at an all-time high. And as you pointed out last week, the fan base is smart. They don't buy into the first place setting or first place standing. They know that there's a lot to still, to worry about it. And, frankly, so much is not working, makes you wonder how they're going to put it together. And I think what Alvin Kamara said in the locker room after the game was very telling. And, it sounds like there's been a lot of speech given and rah-rah, and he's tired of the talk. And he says it's time to just play ball. Are they losing the locker room, Jeff, in your view?
No, I don't think so. Was out there this week. Players, I think, have turned the page pretty quickly. I mean, all it takes is one big win against Detroit, and everyone will be back on board. But I don't think that's the fear. I think Alvin Kamara was just voicing the frustration of really of a lot of people, including the fans. that they've heard a lot of, we just need to get better talk, and they've got to start having actions with some of the recurring problems. I think that's the issue. We talked to Derek Carr yesterday about the red zone issues, and you can isolate it to the Falcons game and explain away each issue, but the problem is it's been a season-long issue, and it's frankly been a career-long issue with Derek Carr. So, it goes beyond just one game, and I think that's where the frustration comes from. And look, you talked about frustration. I'll give you an example, Ricky. Normally I will get between 5 and 10 emails after a game, depending on how it plays out. I spent this week a good portion of every morning, probably a half hour to an hour, answering emails. I probably had 50 emails after that game. And people don't email as much as they used to. You have to sit down, you have to craft a letter. It just doesn't happen as much, but it's just indicative of the frustration level of the fan base.
Yeah, I see that clearly. You look, they're trying to do their best. I listened to the Mickey Loomis conversation this week, and you listen to the head coach and the players and Derek Carr, and they're doing the best they can to put a pretty face on it. Over 400 yards of offense. They continue to, as you pointed out, make a lot of yards. But when you can't score, it's an incredibly frustrating situation. I don't think in my adult life that I've ever focused so much on. I think we got spoiled under Drew Brees. How easy he made it look to score in the red zone. Wasn't the Saints somewhere in the 50% range in the red zone to score?
Oh, yeah. They were over 50% like every year for 16, 17 years. And it's not, I would say this, look, the red zone's an issue, but, there's a lot of problems on this team. The defense is not nearly as good as I think everyone thought they were going to be. They're starting to show their age. That was a concern I had before the season. You can see the team's speed on defense in the front seven. It's not there. That's why the Falcons were able to get to the edge so easily. So there's a lot of problems. That game was there for the taking despite the red zone issues. They just needed to get a stop at the end, and Atlanta ran the ball like 9 straight times right down their throat. And we tend to think this is an elite defense, and I'm starting to question that. So there's a lot of issues with the team, and I think that's why if you just listen to fans, and I get asked a lot, what's going on, what's wrong, and everybody's got a different kind of answer, right, or solution. And to me, just from afar, if you want to take the 50,000-foot view, it's a gradual kind of lowering of the standards that's an immersive effect on an entire organization. It's no different than running a business. The standard that Sean Payton and Drew Brees held the organization to was high, very high, a very unprecedented level in the history of this organization. And all it takes is just a little lowering of it, and it becomes cultural throughout the building, and everybody's standards are a little bit lower. And so it infects the defense, it infects, the offense. And so everyone's wanting to hang, someone like Pete Carmichael or Derek Carr, but it's way bigger than just one person. It's easy to scapegoat somebody, but I think it's much bigger than that.
What's interesting, though, is when you hear Mickey Loomis talk about it, or you hear the head coach talk about it, or you hear Derek Carr talk about it, there's not, I keep waiting for sort of a Jim Moore coulda, woulda, shoulda speech, something like that. But how do you press these guys' buttons? Where at what point do they start to share the same kind of just open frustration that the media is feeling, that the fans are feeling? I just don't see that. There's a disconnect.
Yeah, it's funny. I think being based in Louisiana, it's a very passionate fan base, very passionate people in the Gulf South. I think a lot of fans want to see that same passion, and it's just not reflective of the personalities of the leaders of this team. That's just not who they are. I've seen a little more emotion from Dennis Allen this year than I've seen in the past. He was asked about that this week, too, and he said there's certain times that he does light into the team behind closed doors. Certain times he pats him on the back. It just depends as a coach. But I don't think you're going to see much of that from certainly not from Mickey Loomis. That's not how he operates. And, the organization would tell you their steady, even keel comportment is a strength, not a weakness. I mean, they would point to, say, the Carolina Panthers, who've moved on from another head coach and have turned over numerous times their head coach. They would point to them as an example of how not to operate. So I think, there's probably a happy medium there.
We'll look at some of the frustrating headlines that are out there on social media from various podcasts. And then we'll shift gears and just, we'll turn to page 2, look ahead to Detroit Lions, and, how do we beat this team? We'll see you after this break with Jeff Duncan. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show with my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times Picayune. He knows the Saints so well, and we enjoy visiting with him every single Friday. I'm still a big-time Saints fan. My niece is getting christened, baptized, Sunday morning at 11. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, we'll get done with that and go to my sister's house, and I already know which TV I'm going to be watching. Because hey man, I'm a Saints fan.
I love it.
As long as there's hope, I'm gonna be big time for them. But Dennis Allen as a head coach, 20-44. He doesn't, that ain't a very good record. Here's a headline from YouTube: Is Dennis Allen on the hot seat after Saints lost to Falcons? I'm just kind of toggling down here in no particular order. Is it time to fire Dennis Allen? Toggling down, Saints maxed out with Derek Carr. Would Dennis Allen return next season? And I could just go on. There's so much more. Is Derek Carr one and done as quarterback? It's just a feeding frenzy out there. Everyone's trying to figure it out. But when you look at the statistics just don't look good, do they?
Well, for Derek Carr, they don't look good in the certain special situations. His overall numbers don't look that bad, but when you get down to red zone numbers, third down numbers, among the worst in the league, and those are the money downs. Those are the big plays. That's what the whole league's built on, is succeeding in those areas. And I would say, it's not all him. They've got young receivers. You saw the A.T. Perry mistake down near the red zone. People don't realize, some of those balls to Rashid Shaheed, he's not cutting his route just right. He's making an option read, and he's just not quite refined enough as a receiver. So it can be, Ricky can be off just a foot, but that ball, all of a sudden, the ball near the goal line on the second drive was low down near his knee. Well, if he cuts his route tighter, it's up near his waist, and maybe he makes that catch. It's just these small detail things. That's not all Derek Carr. So I think it's important to note that it's easy to find, the quarterback. They're the leader of the team, but there's just a lot going wrong with the team.
Hey, one thing that's okay. So again, staying with your theme, that there is some positive for sure. For example, it's great after the beginning of the season, after the first 4 or 5 games. It's great to be able to see Derek Carr actually step up into a pocket that we saw Drew Brees do all the time. And so he's actually able to, while he still has a little bit of happy feet, and you can sense that he's feeling the pressure coming on, it's great to see him have actually a little bit of time to throw the ball.
Yeah, I think the offensive line's been one definite positive. The way they play now, they've had some injuries. They're getting banged up there. McCoy's banged up. That's a concern. We were talking yesterday out of Saints camp that, the team really needed to build up some equity in those first 10 games because they were healthy. They played kind of an easy schedule, a lot of backup quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks. They needed to be at like 7-3 or at least 6-4, because now the injuries are becoming an issue, and they haven't built up that one-loss record enough to where they can maybe overcome it. And I think that's the problem. They had a chance there to build up some collateral, and now they're really going to have to scratch and claw to win, just because the injuries are piling up at receiver and at the defensive back.
Olave is back at practice, and there's a chance he will play. Boy, he passed through that protocol pretty quickly. Usually when you're in protocol, you don't get out quick.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, especially a guy with concussion history like he has. I mean, he had a concussion a year ago. He had a concussion at Ohio State. That factors into the formula. So it's very surprising that he's potentially going to play. I would say he's going to play after seeing him at practice this week. I mean, he's looked good. And I'd heard that he was actually fine on the sidelines during the game. But, like, if you hesitate at all during that question and answer session after a big hit like that, they err on the side of caution. But I'd heard from some sources that he was fine, but they had to be conservative.
So maybe he didn't have a concussion is the point.
Yeah, but the way they do it, they're going to always err on the side of caution on that. So, yeah, he would be a huge boost. I mean, if they don't have their top three receivers, they're going to really have to cobble together and manufacture yards and points with their running backs and the tight ends because the receiving core is not going to really threaten Detroit. Now, I would say this. I talked to two of my longtime colleagues up in Detroit this week, and they said that Detroit is really struggling right now. They're not playing well. Quarterback, in particular, Jared Goff, has kind of regressed. I think he's got like 6 turnovers in the last 2 games. I mean, we go crazy here in New Orleans when Derek Carr, has 2. They've had 6 in 2 games out of the quarterback. So they're struggling defensively, missing some key pieces. So they're a little vulnerable, but they're going to come in salty after losing that game on national TV on Thanksgiving Day. They've got a lot of time to stew over that one. And Dan Campbell, and we're very familiar with him, team plays very hard for him. So the Saints are going to have to match the intensity of the Detroit Lions. They did not do that, Ricky, against the Falcons. You go back and watch that game, the Falcons clearly wanted that game more than the Saints did. And it showed in the effort, it showed in the body language. And that was a little disappointing and probably disturbing to a lot of people. You're coming off of a bye week. It's your division rival. There's so much at stake, and the other team just wanted it more.
They were flat. I mean, actually, I made a comment to my son as they were walking off at halftime. It just like some of the air was out of them. I mean, you just didn't sense. They walked off sort of dejected. It was with a whole half to go. I mean, by far the game hadn't been decided.
I think that 6 really deflated them because you get the field goal in the opening drive. Now you're down there knocking on the door again. You got a chance to go up 10-0, and then all of a sudden you're down 7-3, and you've kind of dominated the early part of the game. So I think that was demoralizing.
Yeah. So it's really hard to get your head around how quickly things could have gone in Saints' direction, and it didn't. Yep. But Jeff, you say this all the time, and I think as fans we need to remember this, that there's an incredible parity in the NFL, and often a long game like that can come down to 1 or 2 plays. I mean,
most games in the NFL do, but the one thing I always also stress is that it's kind of a loser's lament when you do that, because I've covered the league a long time, and the losing teams always find a way to not make those plays. And so it's almost like a tease, Ricky. You keep saying, "Oh, we're right there," when really you're not. Because again, it's an immersive kind of cultural thing, and the really good teams figure out how to win. I mean, I watched the Eagles last week win a game against the Bills that was just incredible how they won that game. They pulled it out, they made the plays when you have to, and I think really what you have to crystallize is in those key moments, those key third downs, the red zone, those key moments. How are you executing? And that's where the Saints have come up short in those key situations. It's one thing to make a 20-yard gain and you're at your own 23, that happens in a game. But when you get down to money, the money downs, what are you doing?
So, it's almost like we're going back in time. You see receivers Kirkwood and Callaway back in the starting lineup. It's pretty amazing. It looked like Lynn Bowden had some juice, though, man. I was impressed with what I saw in him.
Yeah, and he's probably going to have to play a bigger role now. He's a terrific athlete, played quarterback in college, just a really terrific all-around player. And they cobbled together again. They used him on some jet sweeps. He can run after the catch. But Detroit defensively is struggling. So their secondary, I think they're missing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, former Saint. They're missing Alex Anzalone, former Saint, who's been a Pro Bowl level linebacker this year. So there's a chance here, but they've got to come in and play with more enthusiasm, more energy and effort. And I really think they will at home. There's an opportunity here, Ricky. You got a 3-game homestand. Doesn't happen very often. And then after you get past Detroit, you got the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants, 2 of the worst teams in football. So We could look up here in 3 weeks and you and I be talking, and the team could be 8-6.
Well, I hope we are.
Yeah.
As a fan, for sure, I hope we are. You look at Juwan Johnson. We still need to get him into the mix. Taysom Hill has turned out to be a really good receiver. He's not a fumbler. It's just unfortunate. In fact, in this case, man, that ball, the force that was put on that ball to knock that ball out with him was really incredible. That's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah. Look, I've said this over and over. I mean, a lot of people focusing on the pick six. Jesse Bates just played an incredible game. I mean, those 2 plays alone he made were in the red zone that could have been Saints points that he turned around. I mean, he was single-handedly responsible for a 10-point swing in the game. He also made some incredible open field plays. So sometimes you have to give credit to the other team. I really think that's important. We all get myopic and we look at perspective through the lens of the Saints, but sometimes you got to give credit to the other guys. I'll give you a good example. Everyone's always talked forever about Jared Cook's fumble in 2020 against the Bucs in the playoffs. And I've always said that was just a great play by Antoine Winfield. He came from behind. He punched the ball out. If a Saints player does that exact same thing, everybody raves about how instinctual the player is and what a great play. So sometimes you just have to realize other guys are good.
I'm looking at a 4-point advantage for Detroit over under 47, at least based on what I'm looking at right now. It's going to be an interesting game. Hopefully next week, Jeff, when we visit, we're talking about a win, and we see some really good stuff in this team. We shall see.
I'll tell you, we were talking, Ricky. It will be interesting early on. They've got to get a fast start, or the dome could turn on them.
Man, they could. The fans are so aware. Hey, we'll be back after this break.